Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to CRPC's webinar on American Rescue Plan Funding, a Regional Approach. First, on our agenda today, we'll have introductions. Then we'll have remarks by Jamie Setz, who's our Executive Director. We'll review the lead goals and objectives. We'll have the main presentation by Jason Wilson and a Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, please place your questions in the Q&A pod, not in the chat. We will moderate the Q&A through the Q&A section of the webinar. First up is Jamie Setz, our Executive Director.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm so glad y'all can be here today, and we're really happy that Jason Wilson from our US EDA is here to talk to us also. I don't know if I was getting a little feedback there. Okay, so anyway, we got a Kendra. Are you hearing the feedback I'm hearing, Kendra? Okay, well, I'll just continue on then. So anyway, we have two things that we need to get accomplished today. One is to review all the goals and objectives that we have in our region for EDA funds. That's critical for accessing them. And secondly, I think what everybody would really like to hear is what are these funds out here through all these new federal opportunities, and how can we make them all work together for our programs to better the region for our goals and objectives. So thank you, Kendra, for putting this on, and then let's get started.
Thanks, Jamie. So let's look at our LEAD goals. LEAD stands for Linking Economic Assets for Development. It is our name for the CEDS, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. This particular strategy is in effect from 2019 to 2024. And we have 6 goals and objectives that we'd like to accomplish in these 5 years. First, infrastructure. Prioritizing infrastructure improvements to help sustain a viable economy. Collaboration, enhancing regional collaboration, participating in regional planning, hazard mitigation, and business preparedness and continuity. Education and workforce, enhancing education and workforce development opportunities to advance creation of quality jobs that match the needs of regional business and industry clusters. Small business and entrepreneurship, fostering entrepreneurship and small business development. Industry expansion and opportunity zones. And all of these play a factor in the American Rescue Plan NOCOs. Now we'll have Jason Wilson come and discuss the American Rescue Plan NOCOs through EDA.
Kendra, thank you so much. Also, Jamie, for your opening comments. My name is Jason Wilson. I'm the Economic Development Representative covering the state of Louisiana. And today, of course, is Capital Region Planning Commission's webinar. And I'm just really grateful to have the opportunity to participate in the event and share some information that I hope will be helpful. I like to say if EDA does one thing well, it's support locally driven solutions. And that's not at all possible unless we're working first and foremost with our partner there at the Planning and Development District. And then secondarily, looking to all of you out there, elected officials and local leaders, to learn more about the needs of your regions and your communities and how to leverage EDA programs to support economic recovery, resilience, and job creation, the types of things we know we all need to get done. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got about 10 slides to share here. And we got there. Slideshow from the beginning. And if I could just get a confirmation that you're looking at my opening deck there, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And also, if there's any feedback or something's frozen on my side, please just holler, yell at me, tell me to stop, and we'll get that IT issue resolved. But I think we should have a pretty smooth presentation today. So again, the Economic Development Administration, we have a $3 billion appropriated by Congress to support the American Rescue Plan.
Jason, not yet. We don't have your presentation yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay, let's just see what's going on there. Screen one, screen two. Share.
All right. We're good now.
How did that go? Now do we have
That's
it?
great. Yes.
Okay, sorry about the two-step there, but we're on track. Here we have a breakdown of the notice of funding opportunities. A few months ago, folks were talking about CARES Act Part 2. In some ways, that's true. Respond, prepare for, and be more resilient to the pandemic. On the other hand, it's quite a bit different in many ways. Under CARES Act, we had $1.5 billion. It was under one notice of funding opportunity. The Austin Regional Office, which covers Louisiana and Capital Region Planning Commission's area, has obligated all of that funding. It's no longer available. So when you're thinking about leveraging EDA programs, at this point in time, this is what you should be focused on. These 6 notice of funding opportunities. What I would say overall is it is a really compelling mix of competitive and non-competitive funding, national competitions and regional competitions, and some things that are frankly unprecedented that EDA has never done before. And so I'm looking forward to sharing information on the programs. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the non-competitive funding. There were 2 categories of funding set aside that were non-competitive. Of the $3 billion, $750 million was appropriated by Congress to support travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation. There was also an amount determined by the EDA headquarters and strategic office to
I'm
support.
sorry, Joanna.
Oh, hello? Okay, no problem. I'm going to carry on there. I think that was just a errant voice there. But and we also have statewide planning of $59 million. The planning is going to support $1 million per state. The additional $9 million there takes into account the U.S. territories, but $1 million per state. And this letter has already gone to the governor's office to determine the use of this economic planning funding. And moving now to the non-competitive travel and tourism funding, you'll see the breakdown for the 5 states. Louisiana was allocated approximately $8.8 million. This is also non-competitive funding with no cost share required. And this letter has also been sent to the governor's office. And we're waiting for next steps to determine, to learn more about what the governor will determine the use of funds will be. The travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation funding can be used to support destination marketing. It can be used for subawards made regionally. And it could also support implementation of projects such as museums, for example. But again, that is non-competitive funding available to the state, and we're waiting to hear back from the governor's office as to next steps in the use of those funds. Next is our first competitive challenge that I would like to share that is available. This is a regional competition. And when I say regional, it means that the Austin Regional Office will be reviewing applications and making the investment decisions on a regional basis. Later in the presentation, we'll be talking about national competitions, which are determined by EDA headquarters. For the tourism, outdoor recreation, and travel challenge, the amount allocated to the Austin region is approximately $16.6 million. And for our 5-state area, our goal is to support approximately 10 to 15 projects with average requests expected to be about $1 to $1.5 million for implementation projects. For example, destination marketing would not be allowable under this challenge, as that initiative is covered already by the non-competitive funding. However, for the competitive challenge, the $1 to $1.5 million request of the regional office would also require an 80-20 cost share and could support outdoor recreations. Perhaps that would be trail improvements. I've used an example recently in the New Orleans area, the National World War II Museum. Improvements were made to that facility under CARES Act. Although a different funding opportunity, it is the type of project that could be competitive and supported under this challenge here, as well as other aspects that could be related to perhaps performing arts or other critical travel tourism sectors of your regional economy. Next is indigenous communities. There are 4 federally recognized tribes in Louisiana. There's $21 million available to our 5-state area. These grant awards will go out at 100% share. If this, my understanding, and I'm quite sure this actually, the federally recognized tribes don't have a presence in the capital region. I think they're in Kisatchie, South Central, as well as the IMCA region over in Southwest Louisiana. So I won't spend too much time on this, but just want you to know that this is also part of the American Rescue Plan Act. Many of you are very likely well aware of and familiar with EDA's Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. It is what we use exclusively under CARES Act. So this program is our most flexible. It could support implementation, construction type projects for new facilities, renovations of existing buildings. It could also support non-construction technical assistance for businesses, feasibility studies, economic strategies, things along those lines. You do have to choose one type of project or the other. Blended proposals are not encouraged, as it's not feasible for the regional office to administer blended projects of that nature. So again, choosing construction or a non-construction proposal. The Austin region allocation is approximately $64 million. Again, that's for a 5-state area. And so the amount that we're expecting to support across our 5-state area is approximately 25 to 30 grants, with the expected request of the EDA share being around $2 to $2.5 million as the upper limit. And again, this would be at the 80-20 cost share. Next is the Good Jobs Challenge. This is truly unprecedented. Those of you, again, that are familiar with EDA would know that when we support existing workforce development programs and things like that, it is almost always a brick and mortar type project, facilities improvements to support existing workforce development programs, construction of new facilities. However, in this case, it really is a unique and special opportunity to leverage an EDA program for a programmatic only request. So this request would not include construction or facility improvements in any way, shape, or form. It is exclusively large-scale program proposals. There are 3 phases with which you can propose: system development, program design, and program implementation. It is a gated process, and that means you have to be signed off on and complete activities under system development before moving on to program design, and then thereby being prepared for your implementation phase. You could propose 1, 2, or all 3 of these elements, and the amount to request that's feasible to support is at the lower end. I think I'm understanding around $5 million to upwards of $25 million for large-scale programmatic workforce development programs. I have 2 slides for this opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and switch to this to just better illustrate what we have to work with. What's unique also is that wraparound services, typically not supported by EDA programs, are allowable under this challenge. That can include transportation, childcare, and even reduced or waived tuition of proposed programs. The cost share is expected to be anywhere from 100% EDA share to 80-20 cost share. It is a factor to consider that local cost share is oftentimes a real signal and indication of local or regional or even statewide commitment or buy-in and support for a project. So while it's true that you can request 100% EDA share, I would encourage applicants and stakeholders to consider putting forth 5, 10, 15, 20%. It is expected that a lot of applications will come in at the 80-20 cost share. And by showing your commitment to the project, that can indicate commitment and likelihood of success. Probably the greatest challenge from my personal perspective of this type of proposal, again, keeping in mind you can request upwards of $25 million for large-scale program implementation, is that you only have 2 to 3 years to complete all the grant activities for the application. So I'm sorry, not for the application, for the project if selected for implementation. So you get 3 years at the outer limit. This is a good opportunity to say that all of the funding going out under the American Rescue Plan Act will be expected to be completed on time and no cost. Time extensions, which oftentimes is routine for EDA to support and approve, will not be considered and looked upon favorably and approved for the American Rescue Plan Act. So no cost time extensions not being an option. Another critical factor to keep in mind for proposing a large scale programmatic type proposal is feasibility. How clear does your application narrative convey that you can successfully get a project started and completed on time? And that is the Good Jobs Challenge. Next is the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. I do wish they would have called this the Build Back Better Cluster Challenge. I think cluster is the critical terminology when thinking about leveraging this program. Clusters could be around energy innovation, biotech. It could be related to advanced manufacturing, other things along those lines. It's just critical to know that what it cannot be is just a cluster of projects in close proximity that would be good for economic productivity. It's just too general in nature. So in order to be competitive under this competition, you really have to first and foremost identify a cluster. Now, the process for this one is unusual and the opportunity is extraordinary. So it's a two-step application process. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next slide. Perhaps I'll come back to that previous slide in just a moment, but I want to just really underline here that it is a two-step process. In phase one, the applicant will request $500,000, 100% EDA share to further develop a cohort or a cluster of projects that are ready for implementation. So for example, your phase one proposal could include plans to implement 3 to 8 projects at the second phase. And that could be all projects that are designed to support the cluster. So if selected for the first phase, you would receive $500,000 of EDA share, 100% EDA share, that is. You can complete the preliminary engineering reports and environmental narratives for each of the implementation projects, as well as further the technical assistance and regional collaboration and strategic activities to help pull the stakeholders together. I also think at phase one, in terms of identifying the appropriate applicant, it'd be critical to let the most significant convener of all the parties involved be that phase one applicant. You would not necessarily have to be an applicant at phase one, would not require you to be an applicant at phase two. So for example, Capital Region Planning Commission could be a phase one applicant or part of a proposal, providing technical assistance on grant applications, pulling together critical regional stakeholders, developing 4, 5, or 6, I guess 3 to 8 is technically the guidance implementation projects. And the combined total for those 3 to 8 implementation projects is $25 to $100 million. I'm not aware that EDA has ever had an opportunity to invest $25 to $100 million in a region. And so it's really extraordinary. The region could be defined by the cluster. It could be Southern Louisiana, central, statewide. It really depends on the stakeholders in the cluster that are coming together to collaborate on this process. While phase one is 100% EDA share, it is expected at phase two that we then revert to the standard expectation for most of these competitions anyway, that it be an 80-20 cost share. So again, phase one and phase two, this is the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, really identified to support critical cluster development. And I'm going to go back to my previous slide again to just illustrate one more time a little bit about the type of clusters that could come together. Being at phase two, it could be applicants that are various from a municipality, a university, a nonprofit, a port, a park, industrial park or business park, that is. And those could all be part of the second phase. And then the first phase, again, would just be one critical applicant. through a two-step application process. You know how to work with Capital Region Planning Commission already, so thank you all for joining this conversation. I will say this, what's really been a spectacular resource, better than anything I've ever seen during my time at EDA, are the ARPA resources at the eda.gov website. The frequently asked questions are very detailed, in some cases have charts and graphics and really explain how these processes work together, how you can leverage the programs and answer a lot of very technical questions. I realize I didn't go into very technical detail here today, but I'm certainly looking forward to a Q&A session and answering any questions that you have. But I just want to make sure you all know that these notice of funding opportunities are open and available now. Please visit the website. And again, looking at those, the NOFOs themselves, but really the frequently asked questions sections is a great resource with very detailed technical information. There's a web link for some of that I was mentioning. And with that, Kendra, I think that is my overview of the American Rescue Plan programs. And I haven't looked in the chat box yet. Let's take a look and see what kind of questions that may have come in.
So right now, Jason, I don't see any questions, but I do have some that were asked previously, so I'll go through those real quick. One question, can I apply for more than one program?
Yeah, thank you very much. It is, there's a kind of a two-phase answer to that question. The first answer is applicants should really do their best to identify the program that is most well aligned with their proposal and submit the project only one time. So for example, this is really coming up most frequently in the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. I'm working with a community in Texas who has a coal community. And in this coal community, they have a very competitive project and it can be submitted as a standalone project. However, they're also working on developing a Build Back Better Regional Challenge proposal in which that one project would be among 4 or 5 others in the region. And so that applicant is making the choice in that case to pursue the Build Back Better opportunity and will not be submitting a standalone project application for the regular economic adjustment assistance. Another way to look at it, and a different example would be if an applicant is part of the cluster challenge, maybe also has a tourism type proposal and would like to pursue 2 totally different projects or NOFOs for very different projects. And in that case, it could be appropriate, but I would just say grantee diversification in addition to geographic dispersion is critical for EDA. So I know that the investment committee in Washington, DC, as well as the regional office in Austin, would do their very best to make sure that we are dispersing grant awards to the best of our ability and choosing new grantees. And so, although the question not asked yet, I'll take this opportunity to mention, grantees that receive grant awards under the CARES Act, if those grant awards are still open with ongoing activities, while you can certainly apply to the American Rescue Plan Act, it could be a challenge to receive another EDA grant award when you have a current one open. But again, with all the nuances of the complexity of these programs, I would not discourage you at all from being part of the Good Jobs Challenge and Build Back Better Cluster Challenge, as those national competitions are really innovative. So I guess I'm really talking about there the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. If you have an Economic Adjustment Assistance grant open, very well could be a good practice to have that closed out before you submit a new Economic Adjustment Assistance Program.
Great. Can I use ARPA Treasury funds as a match?
I understand why that is an excellent question. I've read that many times. They have very aligned with our programs and expected outcomes and exactly the type of work we want to do. And unfortunately, it is not allowable. I wish it was, but we have had an ongoing dialogue with legal counsel and the team in headquarters, and it's at this point not allowable use of cost share.
Can I use CDBG funds as match?
Yes, that is an allowable use of funds. Keep in mind that for construction type projects or implementation type projects, cost share should be committed, unencumbered, and available as needed when the application is submitted. An overwhelming majority of the time, that's cash. But there are times when EDA will consider taking a mortgage on a building based on its as-is current unimproved value. And in some cases, that facility or property can be used to satisfy local cost share for construction projects only. That would not apply to non-construction. On non-construction proposals, you can have a mix of cash and in-kind contribution contributed. And as always, your local share can come from a variety of sources. It doesn't necessarily have to be the applicant themselves carrying the brunt of all the local cost share committed.
I think you addressed this earlier, but I want to make sure. Can I get an extension? Any type of extension?
Well, on the American Rescue Plan Act, no. That is a firm guideline that is out there. All the regional offices and headquarters are following the timeline. Even on the Good Jobs Challenge, I think the recommendation in the NOFO is proposed projects that can be completed in 2 to 3 years. I think the reason they use that time range of 2 to 3 years is because, as we all know, it takes a bit of time and effort to actually close out a grant award. And so there's just certain restrictions based on the appropriation that EDA received. In addition to ensuring all the funds are used on time, all the grant awards will also be announced by September of 2022. So applications submitted now, most likely the regional office will have its first review of competitive applications in September. Those projects selected could be announced perhaps in the spring of 2022. And then going forward, we would be reviewing applications on a rolling basis monthly, with all awards expected to be announced by September of 2022.
Are transportation infrastructure projects, such as supporting local business development, eligible under any of these opportunities?
You know, that's one that I think the answer is it depends. It depends on if the proposed project would be a catalyst for primary job retention and creation. Road improvements are frequently type of an EDA project. As far as transportation and public transport and supporting commuters and things along those lines, it's not that often that I see that supported by an EDA grant award, but I wouldn't rule it out. I would say that's a category of project I'd like to learn more about. Although a question not asked, I'm sure some of you are thinking, there's quite a bit of news and headlines about the infrastructure bill. And at this point, EDA's understanding is that we're not a part of that. So we are all hands on deck focused on the American Rescue Plan Act at this point.
Build Back Better. Could you give a little more detail on the phase 1 versus phase 2? What is the time frame between the 2 phases and for completion of the entire project?
Thank you. I'm just taking notes, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to a screen share. I think it'll help in, let's see here. So the first phase is due October 19th. So we've got about 2 weeks. Let's see if, are you seeing my screen there, Kendra?
Yes.
Okay. From the current slide. Okay, let's see here. So October 19th is phase 1. Phase 1 should be 1 applicant, but that grant application narrative should be proposing 3 to 8 implementation projects. So at this point, the preliminary engineering report is not due, not required. Environmental narrative is not required, but it should be some planning and narrative description on what these proposed implementation projects are, and there could be a range of 3 to 8. The only limiting factor to be competitive is that they are really concentrated and focused on a cluster or an emerging cluster or development of a current cluster. So if with the focus of cluster, 3 to 8 projects, the proposed total value of those 3 to 8 projects is $25 to $100 million. Again, that $25 to $100 million would be expected to have an 80-20 cost share. The first phase application for $500,000 is 100% EDA share. And at phase one, what you can use all that funding for is to complete the preliminary engineering reports and the environmental narratives for each of the projects. Hypothetically, what could happen is at phase one, you're selected, you receive $500,000, and then you are able to complete preliminary engineering reports, environmental narratives, and do more consensus building, strategic planning activities to bring the groups together. Even if you're not selected at phase two, I just think it's a great asset, an extraordinary opportunity to leverage projects that are now effectively shovel ready, because you have all those technical requirements completed already. So there is a little bit of a silver lining, even if you're not selected at phase two. I'll mention that in terms of what's feasible to support here, there are, it's about, let's see, it's $1 billion for a national competition, the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. And it looks like we're expecting, let's see if my other slide identifies that better. Expecting about 20 to 30 of these throughout the country. So there's really not even enough for every state to receive a Build Back Better Regional Challenge. I expect the competition to be intense, but nonetheless, it's very worthwhile. I think even being selected at phase one is a big victory, but the first deadline is October 19th. And then my understanding is you will find out results of that. I'm just opening up my calendar here in December, with the next round of applications due. Planning deadline due in March. So March 15th would be the phase two deadline. This is a good opportunity to say, strictly following the timelines and deadlines for Good Jobs Challenge and Build Back Better is definitely recommended. When it comes to the regional competitions, Tourism Challenge, Economic Adjustment Assistance, and the federally recognized tribes as well, it's recommended to submit full applications by the end of this calendar year, because it's expected the funding will all be obligated at that point.
Are the applications reviewed all at once, or is it on a rolling basis?
On a rolling basis, with the committee, selecting the most competitive applications monthly. And so, but yeah, on a rolling basis.
Is there funding in the programs for grant administration?
For grant administration, you can include a line item for grant administration fees. Our planning and development districts, if interested, and if applicants and grantees negotiate an arrangement, are available to provide post-award grant administration. Some of our planning and development districts don't do that as much as others, and some do it quite a bit. But you do have to either choose the planning and development district to do the grant administration, and that does not have to be competitive bidding. However, if you do it, if you take that on as your own expenditure, you do have to have an RFQ process for selecting a third party to do grant administration on a construction project.
Can projects cross state lines?
Yeah, it's not unusual for a service area to go beyond a state line. And so that is, that's exactly the type of collaboration that is really welcome. I don't think, as long as there's no feasibility issues, and what I mean by that is your scope of work or service area isn't stretching beyond your capacity. But if you have a genuine service area that goes across state lines, I suppose I'm thinking of a project now being developed that would support a service area in Southwest Louisiana and Southeast Texas. There's a natural labor shed there and a service area for a proposed project that we're looking at. And so that's not unusual at all. And that in fact could be really add value to your proposal in terms of regional collaboration.
Are you available to review projects before they're submitted in grants.gov?
Yes, I would say that the best practice going forward, many of you may be familiar with already. So for the regional competitions, the tourism, economic adjustment assistance, and the federally recognized tribes, just not to leave that out, but really for all intents and purposes, the tourism and the economic adjustment assistance type projects, sharing a one pager of those type of proposals before you submit your application via grants.gov is recommended. You have until the end of the calendar year to submit a full application. And I think sharing a brief summary is a very good practice and has been the standing best practice in how I collaborate best with the team at Capital Region Planning Commission. So that's recommended for those regional competitions. For the Good Jobs Challenge and Build Back Better, I would say strictly follow the NOFOs and the frequently asked questions and the guidance online, and share your progress with Capital Region Planning Commission and myself so that we can be up to date. We can add value whenever possible. And the regional office then will have the opportunity to keep the national headquarters team up to date and provide insights about projects, because I am expecting, even though the decisions to be made in Washington, D.C., that there will be a very thorough conversation and dialogue between Washington, D.C. and the regional office in Austin before they make those final decisions. So but I think because of the tight timelines and the complexity of those programs and for Good Jobs Challenge and Build Back Better, it's probably going to serve the applicant best to get right into those actual forms today, if you're interested. So begin looking at those now, start working with the real forms, download them at grants.gov, and then sharing those drafts of proposals with Capital Region Planning Commission and myself, and we'll be available to add assistance and add value.
What are the scope of activities that are supported for the Indigenous communities?
The activities would be consistent with what EDA has historically supported. I'll start by just saying again, it's 100% EDA share, so there is no cost share expected for the Indigenous communities competition. I think that most critical, the first thing I think of is also economic diversification. EDA is not allowed to support aspects that would support or expand or further expand, activities related to the casino or gaming. So it usually will begin a conversation around economic diversification. Is it maybe tied to workforce development training for certified skilled trades? Is it perhaps a makerspace to help individuals with their crafts or arts to maybe establish small ventures and sell their products and other goods and wares online? It can be a kitchen makerspace, a business assistance technical, a business technical assistance type center. But the general EDA activities, but I think probably the main point to keep in mind is economic diversification, entrepreneurship, supporting small business and workforce development type programs. And those are probably largely in the ballpark of what would be supported under that proposal.
Would CRPC ever consolidate local projects into a cluster and act as applicants?
I'll take a try at that. And almost, Kendra, this could be your question, or Jamie or Kim, if you're still on with us. I feel that our district's Capital Region Planning Commission is a perfect example of who could be a phase one applicant. In this case, I'll keep with this example. Capital Region Planning Commission wouldn't necessarily have to be an applicant at phase two. However, they would be there to provide technical assistance on completing applications of the 3 to 8 implementation projects. And should they all be defined and identified and contained within an economic cluster, I think that could be a very competitive proposal. I've heard even conversations about super regional type proposals where perhaps Capital Region Planning Commission in Baton Rouge and the Regional Planning Commission in the New Orleans area could collaborate on proposals. But really, I'll turn that over to you, Kendra, Kim, Jamie, to make comment about your perspective of that sort of opportunity.
Yeah, I think if it makes sense for our applications to be put together, then that's certainly one of the things that we should be looking at. And I would say, as far as super regional, certainly as we look at some of the kind of what we expect as energy changes here in the near future, that's going to change our workforce development needs, not just in the south central Louisiana, but across the whole region, as we've seen this petroleum change over the last couple of decades. And I think that's something we're going to have to address going forward. So yeah, I think that would be at a great super regional vision.
I think this is the last question, Jason. Can you discuss the EDA investment priorities since they've changed recently?
Thank you. Great question. They've been updated to lead with first and foremost equity. I think in many ways, EDA has always addressed this type of issue by way of making investments in grant awards in distressed communities for underserved, populations. But I think what's really inspiring and impressive about these revised investment priorities is that really under equity, just targeting and identifying that there are some folks that have been left out of the partnership, the conversation. And I think that's a big part of the reason why there were so many notice of funding opportunities to very deliberately engage new partners in a greater share. And we have made grant awards in the past to federally recognized tribes, but I think headquarters recognized we wanted to place a greater emphasis on that. Other critical partners, we have university center programs. We have reached out to all of our HBCUs, but I think that HBCUs across all of these 6 NOFOs that we've talked about today could be potential critical partners and new folks that we want to bring into the ecosystem of working closer with EDA. And I suppose I'll leave a thought also about the type of grantee that really has a unique capacity to affect change for those that need additional assistance. And pardon the project example, it is out of the region, but it's in New Orleans and it's the Good Work Network. It is a statewide proposal supported under CARES Act. I believe they're currently doing business as a GoB. They've had a certain revision of their kind of outreach namesake, but the Good Work Network, or GoB, however you may have become familiar with them, is just an extraordinary nonprofit entity doing statewide technical assistance for businesses, primarily owned by women and minorities. And this is largely a virtual online platform and featuring local partnerships. But that's the type of grant award that's made to really make sure that we're making the extra effort to go out and reach to new communities with regards to equity. I don't want to just kind of breeze over the other investment priorities, but they've been standing in long-term EDA priorities. So recovery and resilience, workforce development, manufacturing, exports and FDI, those have been our standing critical investment priorities for years and continue to be so. Workforce development, to put a finer point on that, largely means certified skilled trades. Recovery and resilience is generally, in the context of a nationally, now we have a nationally declared major disaster. I believe that's unprecedented. I don't think there's ever been a nationwide eligibility such as what we're going through right now with the pandemic we're dealing with. Resilience oftentimes will mean not only preparedness for disasters, but also economic diversification, with the theory being and the practice that a more diverse economy would be more resilient to economic shocks and disruptions. And then manufacturing and exports and FDI in many ways speaks for itself. Technology-based economic development, largely tied to commercialization of intellectual property and just the higher end levels of what tech-driven economic development can do for regions. And of course, bringing environmentally sustainable development to all of that. In many cases, energy, innovation, and those type of proposals I'm noticing are really coming in more frequently than they have previously. So that's just a brief overview, but those are the 7 investment priorities. Proposed projects should be aligned with at least one of them, maybe 2 or 3, but I would say focus and concentrating on the investment priorities most tightly connected to your proposed project is a best practice. It's not necessarily recommended to list all 7 and try to find a way to check all 7 of those boxes. Now it's possible there could be projects that are tightly connected to all 7, but for the most part, it's usually 1 or 2, maybe 3, sometimes 4 investment priorities, and identifying those could help your application.
So those are all the questions we have in the Q&A. So thank you so much, Jason, for your time today. If anything you heard today has sparked an idea in your mind, please email us here at Capital Region Planning Commission. We can get started on a project for you to submit.
Kendra, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the opportunity to engage you and the team at CRPC and all of the stakeholders, and I look forward to any follow-on conversations that come up from here.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.